to GN Inspire.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here. And I mean, I always like when random conversations on social media end up into something tangible. So I'm very happy to be here.
Great. Who is Dr. Manyozo?
All right. That's interesting. So first of all, I'm a son. I'm Malawian. I'm a father of two. I'm a husband. I'm a researcher in a way. I'm a chartered practitioner in communications. I'm a consultant. So I'm a lot of things. But I think, simply put, I'm just one person who's curious about life, who believes that when we get opportunities, it's our chance to keep the door open for more people to walk into opportunities. And I think I'll expand a lot more about that based on my experience growing up, having people who open the door for me and then encourage me to still hold that door for more people to be able to walk through that door. And I think I've seen a number of people that I can happily say, oh, I kept that door open for that one. And that always gets me excited and keeps me happy. So I think that's pretty much a summary of it. There's a bit of a CV,
yes,
which basically, if some people are interested, so I have worked with a number of organizations. Currently, I am the communications officer with the Africa Oxford Initiative within the University of Oxford. Prior to that, I worked with the United Nations Development Program as a communications analyst. I have a background in broadcasting. I worked in the media for about 3 years, was the head of public relations for a government body, Human Rights Commission. So I've had that kind of experience in terms of PR and comms. And when I came to the UK, and that's when I got my chartership, which is the highest level you can get, at least in terms of this. And recently got a certificate in measurement and evaluation and so on. So you can already see that I like school quite a lot. And then on the other side, I've also set up 2 organizations. The first one is Youth Movement, and essentially it's self-explanatory. It's basically young people empowering other young people. And then I set up another one, Mapuzo 265, which is basically Education 265, focusing on ensuring access to quality education for young people in Malawi. I think through that work, we have reached over 20 or 50,000 young people. Some that I've directly worked with them, or others have worked through the people that I've been able to recruit as volunteers or have been able to mentor. So I am one person who is always up to something at one.
Man, I know for your followers on LinkedIn or on whatever social media platform they are following you from, you normally spit wisdom, and I know they admire you, and you definitely a learned individual and doing amazing things for the community and to open doors for others, which is super commendable. We'll talk about your book 100%, but I'm curious to know, maybe we can just I know you've given us a summary, but we can walk back just so that our audience can understand and appreciate the journey you've walked and be inspired by it. Because I know I think the book you wrote about mostly your inspirational journey from Malawi to where you are. So maybe you can walk us backwards. Let's start from where you are at the moment, the job. Tell us what about the job is exciting. What do you do on a weekly and monthly, daily basis? Then we can walk back to, because we also have graduate students, so we can go back to your grad school. I know you are a Chevening scholar as well. So yeah, we can. I know we will not exhaust all your academic institutions, but we can summarize them and highlight a few. So let's start from where you are at the moment. What do you do? Okay.
So it's basically just ensuring that people, I think, get to know about the work that the University of Oxford is doing on the continent of Africa. So I work with the Africa Oxford Initiative, and part of the things that we do, we have 3 programs at the moment. There's one on the visiting fellowship program. So this is basically some sort of partnership where researchers on the continent of Africa are able to link with researchers at the University of Oxford, and they're able to work collaboratively, not where one seems to be more senior or is taken as the more knowledgeable, but they are equal partners in this collaboration. And it has seen a lot of fruits. We have seen some that have landed big grants, some as far as over £2 million and so on, based on these particular partnerships. There's a visiting fellowship program that I talked about. Then we have a graduate program, which is basically supporting African scholars to be able to study at the University of Oxford, particularly at the graduate level. Should be receiving about 80 something. I think this year about 75, 80 thereabout. And the idea is the same. You're getting young, gifted Africans to be able to come to the University of Oxford to be able to study, get access to the amazing resources which are there, with the hope that then they're going to go back wherever back is to be able to have of impact. And I guess from history, you already know that the University of Oxford has had that reputation of developing the next generation of leaders, and that is the element where we're linking it to the Africans. And then there's a innovation program, again working with innovators, particularly within the health sector, who are coming up with all sorts of interesting innovations in the health sector. And it's usually high level innovations. So basically you're looking at people that are translating research into something that is viable commercially. So it could be maybe somebody that has done some research in the lab and then they want to develop the next generation of that kind of level, and not necessarily just developing an app and stuff. So that's basically some of the work that I support with communications, which is to make sure that people get to know about these opportunities do exist, encourage people to apply for these particular opportunities, and also share stories from some of the projects and some of these opportunities. It's exciting. For one reason, I'm always meeting amazing people from the continent. And one thing that I think never crossed my mind before I came to this, that Africa has a lot of brilliant people. And I'm not saying that Africa, that time I didn't believe Africa had brilliant people, but it was a limited level of exposure that when you start now meeting, human flesh and blood, and then you're having a conversation with them, it has a way of shifting the way that you think about the continent, the way you think about the work that's going on the continent, where you have people that are, developing vaccines, or they're thinking of developing vaccines, or they're developing, technologies that will help with climate smart agriculture. And there are people that are thinking and they're doing big projects, and I'm always amazed. Same applies to scholars. You have an opportunity of meeting a person who is your scholar, only to hear that, they were a former minister of a particular government. Or you hear, that person that you're just talking about is from somewhere. That level of access and meeting amazing people has a way of rubbing onto you, and to also make you, start having different ideas. And this is why I'm always making noise, encouraging people to come to this party, because I've seen how transforming it is. I've seen people who walk into the University of Oxford who are very timid, very shy, not so confident. And we have seen them grow to become people who are able to stand in front and they're able to speak. And I'm just like, if you saw this person 12 months ago, you wouldn't believe it. And that always. So before I got to the university, I was doing my PhD in China, which is also an interesting bit. And so I started doing my PhD in 2019. And one more interesting thing that people are going to know is that my university, which is Central Chimwemwe University, was in Wuhan. So if you're who is connecting, I was doing my PhD in China in 2019. That's when I started. It was in Wuhan. You already know, 2 months after I got married, coming from honeymoon, then eventually for a PhD, which I wouldn't encourage anyone to do. Not the best planning, but it happened. And because of that, we were having a conversation about the possibility of me visiting again, because you don't just marry someone and leave before, the end of the month. And it was a plan for her to visit me in China, or I come back in Malawi to visit her. And it ended up being that, okay, after Christmas, I am going to come to Malawi, visit, and then I'm going to go back in China in February. Very funny. So that happened. I left China, but the time that I was leaving, there were basically just discussions about, I remember that text because I remember it said, there's a new kind of flu that's going around. Just take care of yourself, avoid markets. And it was very general. I'm like, no, it's December, it's changing of weather. There's always some sort of a flu. I actually know it was COVID-19. So I got on the plane, came to Malawi, and I am watching what's going on. And the next thing is I see an item, it's late January, an item on Al Jazeera saying there are cases of COVID in Wuhan. And I'm like, my place. Okay. Then the cases started up. The next thing I saw was the government is building that 8-day hospital. I'm like, okay, this is serious. But at that point, I was still in Malawi. There was no communication yet from the university. So I was still doing the countdown because I was supposed to go back to China on 8th, I think. 8th February, if not 14th. But it was one of those, but I was going around that time. Then we got the communication. If you are not in China at the moment, it would be wise if you don't come to China at the moment until we're not. A few days later, that communication changed to, you are not coming, is a must. A couple of days later, it came to, if you have a resident permit, it has been suspended. So it meant you can't go to China, right? And then the whole situation unfolded. So I was basically having conversations with colleagues and friends who were giving me a blow-by-blow experience of what was going on day 1, day 2. But at this particular time, I was just chilling in Malawi, and people were like, it seems like you knew what was about to happen. I'm like, I wish I did, but I didn't. And there's only one explanation for me, which is God loves me. I've always said that, like, allowed me to skip it just like that. So then I had to switch to doing a PhD online. And, like, people think that, I don't think we have had a very good conversations about doing studies online during the pandemic. I don't think so, because different ballgame. It was very different. And you're looking at, first of all, China, English is not the first language of communication. And if you are learning in person, you have at least an opportunity to ask for follow-ups, to ask for information, and to be able to get certain things. Well, you have people who can then help. When you're now doing things online, so there's certain classes that I was in that particular class, but I couldn't follow what was going on. So I would have a class finish, and then I'd go on YouTube to watch a seminar class so that I can then grasp it a bit. On top of that, our stipend was suspended because we are not in China. So I'm like, I am a PhD student. I have to do data collection, attend conferences and everything. And all that is hinging on me having finances. Because even if I'm attending classes online, I need a data bundle to attend classes online. I need electricity to attend classes online. And if you suspend stipend, where are you expecting me, a student at the moment, to be able to get? So it was a mixture of experiences. But I went through it. I passed. And I wrote even a blog about it to mention that at that time when I actually got the title, I couldn't believe it, first of all. It took me a long time to actually accept being called a doctor. A long time. And partly was because the road that into that title, I think, could have been smoother. And I was so disturbed in my mind to the point where I said, maybe one day this is going to sink. But now that I'm looking at it, I think it's about 2-3 years ago now, I've come to accept it. I've come to look at the experience with a positive mindset. I'm no longer shocked somebody addresses me as doctor anymore these days, as I was that particular time. But it has been a journey. I can keep going on and on and on about the PhD because there's a lot to unpack in terms of that. We go back to where? University of Sussex.
Yeah. Talk about before. First of all, that is really commendable. I saw some of my friends going through COVID time PhD studies, and so I 100% agree with you. I think it was you guys need a double. I think your doctor should be doctor squared, because I think you had, apart from the challenges of the PhD, you were also going through the challenges of the external challenges, which were not easy, like you mentioned. So commendable. Congratulations on that. Yeah. Briefly talk about your scholarship journey, and I don't know if that was the first time you left Malawi to go to the UK, and then you can take us back to your life in Malawi, educational life in Malawi. We are trying to build a story so that whoever someone in Malawi can see themselves.
No problem. So I think I'll start with how I got to know about the scholarship.
Yes.
And the first thing that I have to mention is the first time that I applied for a scholarship.
Okay.
I had applied for a lot of scholarships, and because immediately after I graduated from University of Malawi, where I was doing my first degree, I was clear about I want to do a PhD at some point. But
What?
that was, I just like the idea of doing a PhD, to be honest.
Okay.
Just that idea.
Okay.
So, and then when I started now doing research at that time, I think I was not prepared of what I was going to find. And here's why. When you're in Malawi, if you are applying from secondary school to apply to university, the process usually is very straightforward. You submit an application form, you pay an application fee. At that time, we're sitting for an aptitude test. That's pretty much it. There was no personal statement and all these funny things that you have to deal with, OSs and all that stuff. So when I was finishing my undergrad and then I was now looking for graduate studies, where I didn't understand how to draft all these documents. I also didn't have the chance of being mentored on how to write a CV, for example. So I was literally going into this world blind. And trust me, that situation is the same today for most of the people that are graduating. And this is one of the reasons why I'm always pushing for universities in Malawi, in Africa in general, to have some sort of a graduate academic or career services on campus, so that once the academics do their part of training us, somebody has to prepare us for that transition from to the industry, because here there's a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. There is a huge gap.
Yeah.
So after that, I did some applications, didn't get in. I lost confidence. I was in a place where I think these things are given to people like friends, people that are politically connected. I just basically went, nuts a little bit. But then I started meeting, people that I knew or people that were friends or people that were together and who were like, oh, I'm doing a master's now in South Africa. And I'm like, on a scholarship, they're like, yeah, okay, how did it happen? And then they started now explaining it to me. So the more they explained it to me, is the more I'm like, okay, so that is where I made the mistake. Oh, this is where I should have done things differently. And one of them was a lady who then asked me that when you're applying next time, just develop application documents. Send them to me to look at them before you submit them. Trust me, I was very confident with all those essays that I wrote to her. It came back in red. Oh, wow. I have it actually. It's one of those documents that I have in my PC. And one day I am going to print it and I'm going to keep it on my wall. And I've sent it to her, several joke about it. She's like, oh, I was too harsh on you. I'm like, no, you know what? It was the medicine I needed at that time, because it was a medicine that changed me from the mindset of this is going to be easier to the mindset of I really need to put some work when it comes to these applications. So anyway, went whole back and forth. I didn't get in on that opportunity that I was applying for, but I had now improved my application game quite a lot. I knew a lot of things. I knew how to write certain documents. So when Chevening came, I had some sort of documents that I had written before that had been reviewed, and I was now just aligning it in terms of what the Chevening are going to be asked, which is the 4 essay questions. And also, because I was geared towards applying, I had documents already with me. A transcript is one of them. And I'm saying this because within the context of Malawi, I don't know about Kenya, but for you to access a transcript, it's not a straightforward process. It usually requires somebody to be at the university, get a hard copy for you to be able to send it to you. And in my case, it would have meant traveling from one district to another district. So when I was preparing this time, when I was saying I'm going to be applying, I already tried to do all these things. I already got my transcripts way earlier. So I had a copy and it was, in a folder. So I was kind of prepared in a way. Anyway, I applied for Chevening. One thing happened. I was supposed to have 2 referees. One submitted, the other one didn't submit. And the system was telling me that that's the case. Then later, I got an email which said, you are still going to move to the next level because many people didn't submit. And what I'm like, okay, let's see how this goes. Then I got invited for interviews. I was so happy and scared at the same time. I was so happy because it was close. I was so scared because I was afraid I was going to mess it up. Because you have been wanting something so bad. You sometimes want to be too perfect that you end up messing it up. And what happened was I started now thinking, okay, so how am I going to do this interview? and who has gone this path before again? And then it ended up that it was actually a colleague of mine. I didn't actually know, because again, this is something that I've said before. People that have gone to do scholarships, to do masters or PhD or gotten scholarships like us, I believe we have an obligation to be able to share our stories to the public so that people get to that they are not the first person to be applying for that opportunity in their country. And in this case, just one friend who said, by the way, you also got a Chevening Scholarship. I'm like, I've been chatting all this time. None of that appeared anywhere. So anyway, went for lunch, and she took me through basically how the interview is going to go. And the first thing she told me is, you shouldn't worry about anything. Actually, you are the material that they are actually looking for. That's the first thing that you need to understand. And it needs to sink in you that you're not going there to create a version of you. You are the version that they are looking for. What you just have to do is to communicate your story, communicate your passion, panel. They are not there to ask you trick questions. They just want to know you. That settled my nerves quite a lot, improved my confidence. And when I was going to that interview, one thing I was certain was that if they are going to get one person from Malawi, they're getting me. If they're getting 5 people, they have already gotten 1. They're looking for the other 4. So that's the level of confidence that I had. I don't even know where it was coming from, but I had that level of confidence. I even got into the interview. Honestly, I had fun. It's rare for people to say that, but I had fun in my interview because here I was just telling them of the amazing things I'm doing. They were even more excited. They started asking me side questions. There was even a time they said, oh, by the way, we have to back to the script because, so that was how exciting it was. And by the end of that interview, they had already started hinting that I am going to be taken, because I remember one lady who just told me, you're coming back, you're likely going to be promoted. I'm like, gotcha. When I'm coming back, that means I'm in. So I had that, at the back of my mind. Finished anyway, got the selection. Then there was an English language proficiency test, which I'd booked, but then it ended up that on the day when I was writing, the machine malfunctioned at the American Embassy. And I had less than a month really to meet that requirement. And I wrote to Chevening, who made it very clear that if I don't produce those documents, it means I am losing the scholarship. I haven't been stressed like that time. So anyway, I'm a Christian, so I prayed a lot about it, and something very weird happened. Like in the morning I wake up, I started getting instructions. Write down a list of people. I wrote down the list of people. Says, okay, write them an email. I'm like, okay, cool. I send them an email. Just explain whatever happened. I did, and then I started getting phones. Chief, what happened? I explained. Chief, we are going. I'm like, what do you mean? No, you're going. We'll sort this out. So one person just said, okay, have you? I said, yeah, I've looked around, and the place that seems to be is Kenya. Like, okay, fine. And I said, okay, we can raise money for a bus. And that's how desperate I was. We can raise money for a bus. I'm going to get on a bus, which I think takes about 2 days or so. I can be preparing as we are traveling to Kenya. I'll write the test and then I'm going to come back. And somebody, no, you need to be fresh. Find money for an air ticket. 2 days I had my air ticket. I'm like, whoa. Then another person said, if you sort out your air ticket, I'm going to pay for the fee. So that is the air ticket now. They're like, no problem. They paid for my fee. So now I'm like, okay, cool. Then another friend said, in Kenya, you need a place to stay. I have a family friend, I'll call them, talk to them, like, no, we're willing to hold. So within 3 days, everything else was sorted for me. And this also was the first time for me to get on a plane, right? So I flew to Kenya, happy and scared at the same time. Happy because I'm at least close at writing. Scared because a lot of people have now entrusted in me, and then I shouldn't let them down, the wrong person. So I really was just focusing on that. Got that sorted out, ended up coming. So that was the first time I got on the plane. It was a ticket I didn't pay for. Then came coming now to the UK. I got a Chevening Scholarship, then go to the University of Sussex. And the thing that I told myself when I was at the University of Sussex is, I am going to be that everybody's going to remember, or everybody's going to know I do exist. And I'm not going to do that by being loud. No, I'm just going to ensure that I am visible in the right way. So when an opportunity came to write blogs, there's a International Institute of Development Studies has a blog series. They were looking for writers, students. I said, no, I'm going to volunteer. So I ended up writing 3 blogs. I remember fellow students were asking me, how do you get your blogs there? I'm like, there was a code. You didn't see it? ended up also selected as social media ambassador for Chevening. For the same story, I said, you know what? I'm going to tell my story as a Chevening scholar so that another person in Malawi gets to know that there are many people that have walked this path before. They don't have to be guessing. That also made me realize that actually there were more people that were looking for this information. And that year, I remember the communications officer at the British Council, at which I told me that actually when we were interviewing this year, and that's the year after, 3/4 of the people that came to the interview, they said they had you personally. And they had to tell me and say, whatever you're doing, just continue doing it. I'm like, okay, great. And then there were other things. So by the time that I was actually finished at the University of Sussex, very good digital footprint, where if somebody, my name, the first page that comes is the Institute of Development Studies blogs. And I'm going to say this because it is very important. In this digital world, a digital footprint is very important. When somebody hears your name these days, the very first thing they are going to do is they're going to go on Google and type. And the first 3 results that come out are going to be the results that kind of give them an impression of who you are. I didn't know at that time, but because I was writing blogs for Chevening, writing blogs for development studies, and then I also ended up having some media coverage because I wrote also opinion pieces. When people Googled my name, there were things. My social media pages were like number 9, number 10, somewhere below. So it gave me an opportunity to be invited into spaces, into opportunities, because like, I think we know what this guy is. And I've often been preaching to fellow young people, if you have to blog on topical issues, do that, because let people know about your mental capacity first. You can have a TikTok account, you can be dancing on that TikTok account and everything, that's fine. But if that only becomes the only place where people get to have an idea about who you are, then there's something that is a bit of a problem, especially for professional young people, because unfortunately it's now a requirement almost where nobody really has you without doing your diligence online, without sweeping your social media to see what you're posting. And I'm always arguing with people. I know I'm not going to win the fight, but for those that I can manage to convert, the little ones, you know what? Just be intentional about it. Anyway, I digress. Now, where were we?
And it's good you mentioned, because you told me earlier you're passionate about personal branding, and I think I'm happy because it's super important. I like the fact that you were volunteering yourself, and you never know who is reading your blogs, you never know who is watching it.
Of course. And it's not like I've stopped volunteering. I am always volunteering. I have boards that I've been co-opted into. Mostly, it's just a volunteering role, and I have learned that they give me an opportunity to explore. They give me an opportunity to meet new people, and some of them are connecting me to things that would have just never come my way, because they remember, they're in a meeting somewhere and people are dropping names and like, oh, by the way, I know there is a guy, and then they are talking positive things about it. You volunteered, you wrote a blog somewhere, or you had this researcher who, I don't know, had a chapter that they needed to write, and then they just needed someone to help them with their data analysis, and you were available as a student, and then you helped them with that and everything. So I've always been intentional about volunteering. I know that volunteering at the moment doesn't seem to get a very positive rep, because people say, volunteering is unpaid work, and I do get that argument. I really do. But at the same time also, it's normal. I think as an African, anyway, as a Malawian, I think I've been volunteering the whole of my life. There are certain things like at church, you just do certain things at church. In the community, there's something going on, you're just asked to organize. It's all those kind of things. And I volunteered a lot even when I was a student, which is basically where I'm going to go, because I think my journey for me started when I was doing my undergraduate studies at the University of Malawi, which is where I'm just going to go and talk a bit about where. First of all, even for me to get into the University of Malawi, the road was not straightforward. For some reason, it seems like literally for me to get into the University of Malawi, I didn't make it through the first selection. It was like that. I was going to get in, I didn't get it, and there was an introduction of what is called a parallel program. And at that time, it was basically just a non-residential. So it's the same program. you're just non-residential, you don't have like at that time, you had students that were basically on government loan and government system, so they had access to certain benefits which we didn't. Our fee was higher and all sorts of things. And unfortunately, sometime on campus, the perception was that the people that were on quote-unquote normal entry were the smart ones. We who came on a barrel entry were not the smartest. Of course, the grades proved otherwise. But that was the perception anyway. So again, when I got into the University of Malawi, I think one of the things that I was just willing to was that idea of volunteering. Because right from, I think, first, second, I just started deciding to take up roles. So there was a role, they needed a chief editor of a student's, or of a Catholic students magazine. For some reason, I felt like I was going to do the job. I just said, oh, cool, I can apply for it. And I did. I learned a lot about publishing. And some of those are actually lessons that are coming in. I'm like, oh, okay. Basically getting writers, putting together a magazine, getting designers, raising funds, getting people who can advertise in the magazine. This is just a student, by the way, who is just in second year, And when I think about it, it's basically the jobs that most of the edit at a professional level. That's the job that I was doing. It ended up happening. Then from there, there was an opening in the Students' Union. Somebody said, I think you could do a good job in the Students' Union. Until then, to be honest, it was something that had never crossed my mind. But then, I think some part of me was also crazy that when I saw the competition, I'm like, I can run against those guys. So I pitched myself, because the last thing that I wanted was basically to contest and to lose. On our campus, I don't know how it was in Kenya, but on our campus, if you lose a selection, that week was not going to be fun for you. Trust me, it was just not going to be fun for you. And I was one of those people who's like, I don't think I want to put myself through kind of experience. But then when I pitched myself, all the candidates, they just dropped, all of them. So I went unopposed. And some said, no, I've just decided to drop, but I'm going to be able to work with you. So they ended up serving as chief editors. Others said, you know what, the reason why I wanted to run in the student union was because I wanted to be able to write material. So if you can provide that space for me, I'll be. So I ended up getting most, if not all of them, being part of my team. And I said, you know what, you have ideas, run with it and everything. The lessons that I learned from there are lessons that I'm applying today in most of the programs. So by the time I was finishing in my 4th year, I had volunteered a lot. My CV was not blank per se, because I had things that I had done as a student. I could show that I'd done this particular magazine. I was able to raise this amount of money and everything. And when I was going for interviews, I was just not talking about my courses. I was also talking about some of those volunteering experiences that I had when I was a student. Again, which is why for students, I'm always shocked when somebody says, how do they expect us when we just graduate? I'm like, you were a student for how many years? 4 years. Like, what were you doing with your holidays? What were you doing when you were in campus? Did your campus still have societies, associations? Did you have charities? And like, we did, but I just didn't. I'm like, yeah, that's where you get most of these experiences. As a Christian, I always say the church is one of the places you can experiment with a lot of gifts. Some of the people that I know who are doing life basically using music, they started in the church. Somebody gave them a microphone, they were allowed to sing off key, they were allowed to come the next day, they were allowed to manage an audience, and they have been able to build all their brand, to be able to build that confidence, and now they are able to sell their music, but they started somewhere. It's the same skill set, but because people don't avail themselves to volunteer, when they cross over now to start applying for jobs, it becomes difficult for them to relate. For me, it was easy because I was able to say, I have done this as a student, and I think I can apply the very same skills now when I've joined your organization. And it helped me quite a lot. And also, I think when I was basically in between finishing my studies and then looking, I had to survive. And I think this is one of the things also that we really need to have a conversation about. Yes, you have to look for it. I was looking, but I was not finding one. And you graduate from school, the stipend from your parents stops, which means you are broke, but you need to buy airtime. You need to text that particular girl or that particular guy you like, and so on and so forth. So you have to find a way of raising money. For me, I went back to the skills that I had. I have graphic designing skills. I said, you know what? I'll be designing a few things for people. I was able to sell soft drinks at home, again, because my brothers gifts in music, so they do produce music. So you have people that are always coming to the studio to do their recording. So I knew there's a clientele that's already there. I'll buy soft drinks, I'll buy some snacks. When these people, they're usually going to be here for the whole day anyway. They might as well buy some of this, and then I was selling in the neighborhood and so on. I'm a graduate, by the way, but I'm able to understand that I still need to find a way, yeah, of making some money. Why this is important is because, again, even now when I'm working, I do not only focus on the job. I focus on ways on how I can still have multiple income streams. And it was that experience of, being a student who was looking for opportunities that taught me that, you know what, it's just not going to be as straightforward. Literally multiple income streams for you to be able to stay afloat, for you to be able to be safe. We recently saw how our brothers and sisters lost their jobs due to the USA ID cut. But a good number of them, at least from what I've been able to see, they've been able to bounce back, not because they got a job, but because they had that planning already. Others don't know, I've always been on contracts, so I always have some money saved somewhere, or I always have some businesses and everything. Mindset that I would want us to have, because I don't think this is the last time that we're going to see something like this. No. And the people that are studying now, you are studying in a very interesting time, to be honest, where things are changing at such a rapid pace, and you have to be the most flexible person in that particular sense. Anyway, I can keep talking.
Your story is so sweet. You know what we are going to do. We are going to have two parts of your story. We are going to have this story part, because I still want us to have time to go through the author journey, because I know many people want to share their stories and they don't know where to start. Like, I have a draft, and people have manuscripts already, but they have no idea like how to publish a book. So we'll spend some time there. But let me before we even like switch gears and go to the book and author journey, two things that I want to mention. The one is just like to commend you for the faith you've had. You were describing how, like, I was just thinking, like, if it was me, I'll just be thinking, like, is it even worth getting a flight to Nairobi to go do English exams? What if I fail? Like, is it even worth it? But you went with faith, right? Like, with hunger, like you were hungry. There was no other option. And I'm always encouraging my students to be hungry that way, and also just to pause and say, man, by the time we come to these institutions abroad, I wish people could appreciate the challenges we go through, like English exams, paying for them. I sent for one actually, but just like preparing, and then materials, resources, and you like taking flights to another country to do the exams. Super commendable. Then I hope my audience listening to the story can challenge themselves. Like, before you lose hope on something, can you stretch a bit? Can you stretch a little bit? Like someone else is. Can you stretch a bit? Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I think I've always believed that sometimes, like, you really don't have an option sometimes. And then in my situation, it was too close. Giving up to me just felt wrong at many levels.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I have understood the whole rejection process before. I am literally close, and then also being somebody who believes that, you know what, I have faith. And I really don't know where the next solution is going from, but just going to take my step. That has literally been a story of my life, where I literally just move and things start coming together.
Yeah.
I was telling one friend of mine actually that the best way actually to describe my life would be somebody who is in the air, they just jump and they are hoping that the parachute that they have is going to work. That has always been my life, where I'm just hoping that the parachute is going to work. I've jumped, I'm hoping the parachute is going to work. But even if it doesn't work, I'm sure I'll be fine. Number two, I've always been one person who privileged to know who have told me what is possible and what is impossible, that sometimes I do crazy things and send people meet me afterwards and say, do you know what you have done is just crazy? I'm like, oh, sorry, nobody told me that this was insane. And that has been very helpful. The third thing is that hunger you were talking about. I have always been a person who believes that there is more to this life. There is more to what I can offer. There is more to what I can experience in life. And that has always created a certain level of hunger in me.
Oh, perfect. I was going to ask you to share career lessons you've learned so far, but I feel like we've just done that. So what we will do is we're going to wrap up this section and call it a summary of your personal story. I know you've not even touched a quarter of your story.
Well.
Just given us like a synopsis, and I know hopefully you've included some of this in the book. So yes. We'll switch gears and go to talking about your book in the next